pretty much the unit's focus overall was hunting down high value targets that were related to Saddam's regime, and then ultimately catching Saddam Hussein. So we called it whack-a-mole. I mean, it was 24 hours a day, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It was all day, every day. Whenever we had a lead, we were chasing these things down, and all over the country. So it was a bit tedious. It was a bit exhausting. And after a while, you start joking with the intel guys like, oh, it's just another hit. There's nobody going to be there. And honestly, we weren't meeting after the initial invasion. We weren't meeting a ton of resistance. I mean, a lot of the Saddam loyalists, they wanted no part of us. We showed up in the middle of the night in helicopters and, blew their doors in. Most of those guys were, yep, I'll go with you. So that, there's a few things in there early, but around time fall of 03, things started heating up, getting a little more serious. We had a few major engagements. Our first foreign fighter engagement in Iraq, which was a sign of things to come, was actually October 31st of 2003, pre-Saddam capture. But then we continued on, and then on December 12th of 2003, my troop, my team, we were in Baghdad doing operations, and we had a lead on a guy that our intelligence folks believed, and I say our, I mean Army, the unit specifically, intelligent folks believed was the key to where Saddam was hiding. He was his primary courier and the guy that, passed messages and money around the country to all the folks that were supporting him. And we believed he was in Baghdad. So we went out on a hit that night. We hit a location, turned out to be, he wasn't there. But we got some intel while we were on target that he was in the area, and we sort of pinpointed where he was, and we went and conducted a follow-on assault. It was a split apartment upstairs. We hit the apartment, no shots fired. And the individual we were after, which we didn't know it was him at the time, but was actually hiding under a bed with a toy AK-47. So he's lucky he didn't get shot.
But I say, what is the logic of having a toy AK-47?
I think he just jumped under there and didn't realize that the toy AK was under there. And so we had a chuckle about that. But the curious thing about him, and his name was Mohammed Ibrahim al-Muslit. And the curious thing about Muslit, even though he didn't look like the pictures we had, shortly after we got him back, the intelligence folks and the interrogation team realized that that's who it was. But in his, you do what they call sensitive site exploitation, or SSE, where you go through all the things on their person, all the things on the target. You're basically gathering intelligence. And he had a number of sequential $100 bills. So serialized, the serial numbers were literally sequential, which, if you know anything about banking, that only way that happens is if large sums of money are pulled out at one time or another. So that was kind of interesting. And we weren't sure why, but so we went back to bed. The interrogation team and intelligence folks continued to work on Mooselet into the night. And probably 5 o'clock in the morning, our lead intelligence analyst, Walt was the guy's name, and the guy that really tracked him down, came running in and said, hey, get your kit on. You guys are going up to Tikrit. Mooselet's spilling the beans. He's just like we said, he's the golden ticket, and he knows where Saddam is. So they put him on a helicopter and flew him up to our counterparts, another troop in Tikrit. We hopped in vehicles and drove up. While we were on the way up, funny conversations like, could this really be it? We were placing bets with each other, like, are we really going to get him this time, or is he going to slip away? Because to be honest with you, we never really felt close. We'd gotten a ton of people close to him, but no one seemed to know anything. And this is the early days. These guys haven't been captured before. They don't have resistance training. Like, most of them would fold over with whatever information they had in the early days. And so, yeah, so there was some joking about it, but we got up there, and the troop that was up there, our sister troop, had taken Mooselet out on a close target reconnaissance to kind of pinpoint the couple of locations where Saddam could be. And we planned a mission that night to do basically a split troop and hit both locations. One was Saddam's personal chef's house in a small little town of Samara. And then outside of the town was that same chef, was his family's farm where his two brothers lived. So we did a simultaneous assault where we, using ground-based vehicles, got close and then maneuvered in and hit both those locations at the same time. I was actually on the cook's house in town. And when we captured Mooselet and began sort of battlefield interrogation and asking some questions, he rolled over really quickly. And I joke with a friend of mine, Tom Satterley, I think, and I don't know, Tom would probably tell you for real, but I think Tom asked him, if it's just you and your wife here, why do you have 60 pounds of fish in your freezer? And it was a known fact that Saddam ate fish every single day. And he was super paranoid, which is why he had a personal chef. And obviously, one of the two people that he trusted more than anyone else in the world was this guy, Case, his personal chef. And so Tom asked him why he had 60 pounds of fish. And he said, because I'm Saddam's personal chef and I feed him every day, basically. So the other troop, while that's going on, ends up with what we call a dry hole, which means we didn't get who we were after in radio speak. So we were a little perplexed. We briefly had Mooselet and Case, the chef, look at some maps, and that was useless. Ended up putting them in the vehicle and driving them out to the farm where the guys were. And in very short order, they realized that Mooselet, in a last-ditch effort to protect Saddam, had pointed out the farm next to where Saddam was. Luckily, the guys hadn't fired a shot on the first target. They had done it under complete darkness and night vision. So they hadn't made a sound, and they moved over to the farm next to it, hit the farmhouse, found his two brothers, no Saddam. And then about 15 minutes into it, just sort of moving around the site and looking for all the little locations, Mooselet sort of indicated that, there's something down there. And the guys pulled the rug back. It's basically a styrofoam plug with a rope on it. Pulled the styrofoam plug out, and Saddam was sitting in the hole with his hands over his head, not looking at him. Yeah, he was pulled out of the hole, and kind of the rest is history. But yeah, it was a pretty amazing moment. It's hard to believe it was that many years ago. We all thought we were going home, like, hey, mission accomplished. But yeah, unfortunately, warfare continues, and Iraq evolved into much worse situations, and we continued.
And that's what we're going to get into right after this Saddam part. What point of the Saddam mission did you start thinking, okay, we're getting them tonight? Was it when the fish came up? Because that, to me, 60 pounds of fish, one or two people, that's a big red flag. At what point were you like, this, there's now serious smoke, the fire is here?
Really, it was before that. I think everybody collectively, each guy his own, but I think on the way there, it started out as, there's no way this is it. There's no way this is it. By the time we got to Tikrit, and we knew that they had taken Mooselet out on a close target reconnaissance, and that he had identified some locations. And our intel guys were so adamant about Mooselet being the key. Like, he was the guy. Like, this is it. We're finally on the right thread. We're going to get him. I think by the time we got up there, we were ready, and we believed it was going to happen. And sure enough, it did. I think the radio call when we got him was possible jackpot, because they didn't want to say 100% for sure. But, knowing that the guys that pulled him out as good friends, there was no doubt in anybody's mind that that's who it was.
And isn't maybe this is just an urban legend, but didn't he identify himself? I'm Saddam Hussein, the president of Iraq, and didn't one of the first guys who pulled him up say something along the lines of George Bush sends his regards?
I think he punched him and said, George Bush says hello, bitch.
Yes. So that's a true story. Now, were you guys, that's incredible. Were you guys told going out that night, here are the rules of engagement, we want to take this guy alive? Or what did they tell you before you snatched him? Because with the bin Laden raid, for example, another comparable thing, they shot their way in and then shot him on the third floor. You guys obviously took Saddam alive. So what were you told ahead of time?
Yeah, so most missions, particularly in those days when you were chasing a high value target, were kill or capture. So you were authorized in either circumstance. When you're part of the most highly trained unit in the world, particularly at hostage rescue, you're really, really selective with your fire. I would like to say that most guys would have to take rounds before they gave rounds out. So the Saddam mission was actually interesting because they knew that the aftermath of capture, just like they knew with bin Laden, was going to be a mess, that it would take a long time to sort out, that he would be a security risk, whether we kept him in the country or took him out. So Saddam was actually a kill mission. We weren't supposed to bring him back.
Wow.
The difference is when you pull an unarmed individual out of a hole that you can't identify, not a man. People can say whatever they want about U.S., literally the ethical standard bearers for the world. I myself have never witnessed a guy do something that I didn't believe he should have. And I think there's a lot of people out there that judge situations that they have no clue about because they've never walked in people's shoes when you have to make a split second decision. But all that said, yeah, we pulled an unarmed old man out of a hole. There's not a man in that unit that would have put a bullet in the guy at that point. So it was what it was. It's the way that it unfolded. And frankly, we were all happy that we did it. I mean, years later, when you look back, it was really cool in the moment. And then, the mission goes on and you just kind of go on with work and you forget about it for a lot of years. But for those of us that were a part of it, looking back on it, like we got to remove an evil dictator from a country, regardless of how you feel about us being there or not. As a service member, we accomplished what we set out to do. And that was pretty substantial.
Right. So it's not only substantial. I mean, you're a part of history in many ways, obviously, but that is a raid and an evil SOB, and you played a pivotal part in bringing him to justice. So that's pretty cool. You just mentioned foreign fighters.